Okay, just bend over a bit more. That's it. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, I promise I won't put these on only hands. Yeah, bit more. It's been said that the day you build your first PC is the day that your PC is no longer fast enough, ever. Nobody thinks about having a slow PC more than somebody that's got a fast PC they built themselves. People with slow PCs don't sit there thinking, oh, I've got a slow PC. They just have a slow PC. They'll remain happy and stupid with no goals, just like console gamers. Now I know before I even start to make this video, there's going to be people sitting there with a crusty old dual core i3 that are making videos with their iPhone, recording the screen with the Xbox app and making the videos with Clipchamp, and they'll say, oh, my PC's good enough for editing. Yeah, maybe, but for people with goals that actually want to do something and get somewhere, it's not. They're a waste. If you want to get somewhere, video editing and doing pictures, media, whatever, you need a decent PC that's going to be reasonably quick and work most of the time. So, I'm assuming, rightly or wrongly, that you've started your YouTube channel. You've got probably 20 subscribers, at least 2 of them aren't friends and family or extra accounts that you've made for yourself to guarantee the thumbs up, and you want to take it to the next level. So, although I can't help you with your content creation, I can't help you with your camera setup, I can't help you with the lighting, pretty much I can't help you with anything apart from if you want to put together a budget machine that's going to do the job reasonably well, and also you can play a few games while you're procrastinating when you should be doing something else, all that, I'm here to help. So let's get to it. This video, because I've had to run through loads of stuff, I've had to make loads of notes. So yeah, I ain't going to pretend I ain't looking at my book. I'm looking at my book. Right, so here we go. First up, I know that part of PC ownership is being part of the community. So you're probably going to think, right, do I go Intel or AMD? So I've done a list of pros and cons. Performance per pound, that's what I've written, is better on AMD CPUs up to the £150 mark. And then, because we're keeping in the budget, so then it evens out. And I'll throw up a chart while I'm talking. I think the top CPU, and the prices are based on what I can get now as of August 2023, used or new in the UK. So the dearest one is the i5-13600K. Cheapest one is an i7-6700K at £60. Right, so that's the performance advantage. If you're looking for raw horsepower, forgetting anything else, up to £150 mark, the AMD's better, in my opinion, and according to the benchmarks that I've looked at, etc. Right, if you're on your Facebook pages, community pages, whatever, and you like to be a keyboard warrior, the AMD community has more online defense. If you're bigging up AMD, you're more likely to have your AMD bros jump in and defend you against the evil Intel and Nvidia. This is looking at tons and tons of pages and things, so could be wrong, but that's what I'm saying. And also, you do tend to get more aggression overall from your Intel users, and I'm guessing that's because they've spent a massive amount more money, so they don't want somebody basically coming in with as much or more performance that's basically spent less. Because generally speaking, what I will say with Intel is you buy it, put it together, everything works. With AMD, that ain't usually how it is. You've normally got to go around the houses to get the experience you want, messing around with BIOS menus and all that. But at the same time, a PC enthusiast probably might enjoy doing that, in which case the AMD is definitely the better choice. If on the other hand you just want to whack it together or buy a pre-built and you want everything to work, there's always going to be failures, but most of the time Intel. Big advantage of AMD, and it's always been like that apart from when the Ryzens first come out, because obviously it was a completely new platform, is that you can get a motherboard and you can use multiple generations of CPU. So you can set yourself up a relatively cheap system and you can upgrade it gradually, either with a better motherboard, better CPU and so on. Whereas with Intel, to get any meaningful upgrade, unless you've gone for the flipping poverty spec CPUs, you're going to have to flipping upgrade the whole thing. So that's a big plus with the AMD. On the other hand, the Intel, most software tends to favour Intel and supports it better. And if you're looking from the point of view of video editing, the codecs and things are going to favour AMD, especially I think with they can use the integrated GPUs for some sort of acceleration. Don't know the full ins and outs of it, but just reading on the different video editing forums to do with DaVinci and that's the vibe I'm getting. So there's that. So yeah, you can make your choice on there. On this particular system I've built, I've gone with AMD because I put it together about 2 months ago, so obviously I was looking at the prices then. Things have changed a little bit at the moment. So CPU choices, I have gone, and you can see it's in the background here. I'll probably do some other camera shots or throw in a bit of B-roll because I know everybody on CPU channels likes all that. I've gone for the Ryzen 3700X. That was £110 from CEX 2 months ago, maybe even 3 now, with a 24-month warranty. And at the time, from the research I did, that was the best pounds for performance. Most video editors who are serious into it will say you want a decent number of cores, although there's a lot of people out there say that 6 cores, 12 threads is enough, but 8 and 16 are bigger numbers, so I went with that. And yeah, I'm not massive into video editing. All I can say is compared to using my laptop that I was using before, and I've done a bit with my Haswell i7, it's definitely a lot quicker and a lot better for that. So there you go. But if you was buying now, you're going to be able to buy that CPU for £95, I do believe. It might actually be 100. That was 95, it's gone up to 100, but depending on where you want your budget to go, I've done this as an £800 machine, but you could spend another 50 quid and get a 5700X, which is probably, yeah, that'll probably give you a fair bit more power, and you can go all the way up, because I've got the X570 chipset, to 5900X at £250. So yeah, that's what I went with. But obviously if you was looking at Intel, if you want to go the higher end of what I was looking at, you go 13600K, and I think I was looking at 8700Ks, which are about £100 as well, and I've actually got one of them. If I put it on the bench I can test it at a later date. Only thing I'll say with that CPU, out of the box, and that's got a Noctua NH15 cooler, which is one of the best twin tower air coolers you can get. You can obviously see as well that it's open air, because I couldn't be asked to put it in a case, because I probably ain't going to necessarily leave it built. That would not underload turbo to its full speed. That's meant to go up to 4.4 gigahertz. When I tested it in Cinebench and that was flicking between 3.8 gigahertz and 4.2. So what I've done, I've undervolted it using the negative offset in the BIOS by a few volts, tested it for a while to make sure it's stable. I had to keep sort of tweaking it up and down, and that will hit, when I've monitored it, that will hit 4.4 gigahertz, and that won't ever drop below 4.1 now when it's under load doing video rendering or whatever. But as I said, that's what you're playing with AMD. You got to be willing to mess around a little bit, or you're not going to get full fat performance. In terms of overclocking, I can overclock it. I've run a couple of benchmarks, but the second you mess with the multiplier or the back clock, you end up where that will keep pumping in full voltage, and it won't lower the clock either at idle, which ain't great. And as soon as you try and do any DaVinci benchmarking, because I've got the Puget Systems benchmark, it will literally crash. It will not do that benchmark. So that ain't a CPU you want to be overclocking. The other reason I picked that one as well, because it's capable of using resizable bar. I've got an Intel Arc, so I can use that and any of the latest cards with it. Where if I'd have gone for an older 2000 series Ryzen, I couldn't do it. And with a lot of the Intels, I think if they're earlier than 10th or 11th gen, you can't use them cards either, not properly. So that was the reason I went with that CPU. It's also got 32 megabyte cache, which is decent as well. Right, the motherboard I went with is an X570 ROG Crosshair Hero. I do like decent motherboards. I cannot be dealing with weak VRMs which start to wear out after a while, so then your chip starts throttling. I like also to have the flexibility to add extra graphics cards, overclock better, all that stuff. I would always recommend, if you're going to build something to do work, getting the best chipset, and especially with video editing. This is set up running on the free version of DaVinci, but if you upgrade to the studio version, which if you get serious enough you will do, the studio version will make use of multiple GPUs, and they do scale quite well. So anyone telling you for a decent editing machine to only get a motherboard which supports one graphics card, it's like, you want to take it with a bit of pinch of salt. You're better off getting something that will take two cards, because that's most likely going to give you a bigger performance boost in future to buy yourself a second older cheap card than it is to have to go out and buy a bigger newer card and all that. So that's why I went with that. Keep maximum flexibility, that's what I'd say with the motherboard at all times. Paid £140 off eBay for that board. I've seen them on CCL for £300 refurbished with a 6-month warranty, and they're brand new about £365. So if you was in the long run, if you're going to do a lot of work, I would say that'd be worth paying your £365 to get a new one. Obviously we're on the £800 budget, so in that budget I've allowed up to £200 for a board, so you might have to go for a little bit lower spec board. Anyway, next on to the memory. I picked 32 gigabytes, 3600 RAM, £75 for Kingston Fury Renegade. So Kingston's a decent enough brand. It's Hynix memory, so you ain't necessarily going to be able to run real tight timings, but to be honest with you, I've done a little bit of benching and testing, and for doing this job you don't need super tight timings. The Ryzen as well works best, this particular chip does, with 3600 speed. I have run it a little bit faster, but then you just get instability and crashes. If you run slower, it's definitely going to be slower. But yeah, to get faster RAM you've got to start messing around with the Infinity fabric, trying to lock it, and it's just, you're just going to cause yourself problems. Same with the SoC voltage. A lot of people talk about turning it up. As soon as you start doing that, you cause instability under heavy loads, so I don't I don't recommend messing about with it. So yeah, 3600, you ain't going to save a lot of money by going for slower, but you are going to cost yourself a lot more money if you go for faster RAM, so that's the optimum. Don't know what they're like with that speed's like with the 5000 series CPUs, but if you buy 3600, you can usually overclock it easily by at least a couple of hundred megahertz if you really want a little bit more performance. But you know, I don't think that'll be your optimum, certainly for budget build. For the hard drive, I went for a 2TB Kingston NVMe. Cost £70, 3,500 megabytes a second transfer speed. So what I'll do, I'll get my camera files, I'll plug in the USB port, I'll put it straight onto that disk. So that's the disk that's got DaVinci and everything else on, and then that way you're going to get the fastest transfer speeds between the files you're working with and the actual program. Whereas if you start trying to mess around with external drives or slower drives, you're going to end up, when you're doing scrubbing and editing, that ain't going to be quite as good. So ideally you want to have a decent size NVMe SSD for optimal performance, and £70 now for 2TB is a no-brainer. Graphics card, I went with the GTX 1080, 8GB. You'll get people out there saying you don't need a lot of VRAM for video editing, but to run the official DaVinci benchmark from Puget Systems, you won't even be able to run the benchmark without 6GB of VRAM. So really you want an 8GB VRAM card. That's going to be better for doing your effects. The card does make a little bit of difference on the free version, not loads. I did bench it with a GTX 1070 as well, and the Intel Arc. I will say there were certain areas where the Arc weren't as good as that 1080, and I think that's because the codecs and everything inside the NVIDIA tend to work with them types of programs more, and also NVIDIA's got drivers that are purpose for doing productivity work. They'll still play games with them drivers, but they're optimised for doing this sort of job. So generally speaking, I'd recommend NVIDIA for this, and like I say, £120. If you want to get anything more powerful significantly, you're going to be paying £200 for a 1080 Ti or a used 3060 or something. So that's why I went with that. But I tested it, like I say, with a slightly worse card and a newer Intel Arc. That's what I had. What else have I got? I think that's pretty much everything. The only thing I can really do is just throw up on the screen roughly what I've allowed for each item at cost. Obviously the power supply for the system I got on the bench there, a decent sort of 550 watt with a 40 amp 12 volt rails, easily going to be good enough. If you want to start running multiple cards, you then need something more powerful. But I've allowed, what, £60 for a PSU, a good one. You don't want to have a rubbish one, especially when you are doing stuff, you're really flipping hammering that CPU and that, so you want reliable voltage. But yeah, I mean, roughly with what I've spent and what I'm allowing for everything, you could build a system like this for 800 quid, which is easily going to be good enough for a beginner making YouTube videos, or I don't know, whatever else you likely want to do, edit your flipping video, pictures, all that type of stuff. So yeah, I hope this helps anyone who's a little bit unsure what to do. Obviously there's always different choices, pros and cons with all of them. One of the things I will say though that does count against the AMDs, especially this particular one, is I had a problem with the USB ports where I'd plug my camera in to have a look at the videos, because when you're using the little screen at the back, you can't really see what it's going to look like when you've actually done the film. So what I'll do usually is I'll try and set everything up with my lighting and everything as best I can, and then after I've filmed a little bit, put it on the computer and check it. I'm using a Canon, so that's got the big old cards and that with the pins. You don't really want to be taking them in and out too much because you're running the risk of bending pins. So obviously you want to be able to plug straight into your USB port. Also, you don't want to be swapping files between different computers to get your videos off either. And what I found was I could not get the files to come off or play through the USB, so I had to go all round the flipping houses on the internet, messing around in the BIOS. What actually cured it was disabling C states. Now that's just one problem. There's loads of things I've had over the years with AMD, and if you put the time in, you will find a way of sorting it out, or somebody out there will have sorted it out. But that is just the one thing you got to bear in mind with AMD. Whereas you go with Intel, say for example you built an 8700K system, that might not be quite as fast for doing the job, but odds are 9 times out of 10 you plug something into it, it's going to work. So there is that to consider. I just decided, just on what I knew, I wanted to build a video editing PC and I wanted a new system to play with, so I put this Ryzen together. But that's the only thing I would say. Yeah, otherwise though, if you want something that will do the job, especially if you don't mind putting a little bit of work in just to getting it really good, then I do recommend the Ryzen. However, if you're just somebody that wants to plug and play, then I would have to say you might want to take a little bit of a performance hit and go down the Intel route. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you've made this far, please like and subscribe. If there's any comments you want to put down, feel free, for anything you want me to test or try or do or whatever, and I'll see what I can come up with.